start our local edition. Brad Pomerance here in the Long Beach area, joined by Eric Bauman. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, vice chair of the state Democratic Party, and recently he had the chance to meet the presumptive Democratic nominee. Her name is Hillary Clinton. In fact, I understand you were there when she was informed that she was the presumptive Democratic nominee in Long Beach at Long Beach City College.
I was giving a speech to rah-rah and rally up the crowd, and I was talking about the sound that they all heard were thousands of shards of glass as we were breaking the glass ceiling, and my phone was in my pocket, buzzing and buzzing.
Right.
And I walked off the stage and I grabbed my phone to see why it was buzzing, and it was the Associated Press saying that she had achieved the number of delegates to be the nominee. When I went backstage, I said to her, well, I just gave the speech about thousands of shards of glass hitting the ground. Little did I know that I'd come back here and tell you that the Associated Press says you've now broken the second to the last glass ceiling, which was that. And we both kind of agreed that was probably not the best of news because it might cause people to stay home and not vote.
But I was fascinated by the fact that she won California handily. I mean, virtually every poll as we were heading up to Election Day had it as a dead heat. I mean, there was one poll that said amongst likely voters she was ahead by 10 points or whatever it was. But this was
the last poll, which was the USC Dorn's Life poll, had her up 10 points. It called her race within a point. It called the senatorial race within a point. It was the very most accurate poll.
But why is it so many other polls had the race so much closer? I mean, even the day before.
First of all, I think there was fluidity.
Okay.
I think that polling today is tougher than it used to be. You know, let's face it, 20 years ago when you did a poll, you called, 1,000 people at home and you did a poll. Today you have to figure out who's going to vote, how many of them are voting calling on landlines, how many of them are you calling on cell phones, and, it's a much more complex thing. There was definitely momentum going on.
Why?
I don't know why, but you could just feel it in the air.
I mean, there's no question the Clintons have a tight relationship with the state of California. Bill Clinton.
And they spent 5 or 6 days here, running up and down the state. I mean, President Clinton did like 8 events in one day, 8 public events in one day. That's a lot for a 70-year-old ex-president to do. I got news for you. When I do 3 or 4 in a day, it's a lot for me.
I want to speak about the tragedy in Orlando. I got to tell you, the depth of despair that our nation is feeling as a result of that incident is palpable, and it is heartbreaking. You are a member of the LGBT community. I can only imagine, look, you're an American first, but being a member of the LGBT community, how are you feeling in the wake of the horrors of Orlando?
Well, let me say this. I feel every time we have one of these kinds of tragedies, I feel the same way. The fact that that this hit the gay community on Gay Pride weekend made it, of course, more difficult. But the reality for me is that once again, a psychopath with an assault weapon went in and killed people. In fact, killed more people than has ever happened in any similar shooting.
But let's talk about that psychopath. Yes, he had an assault weapon, and we can talk about the fact that assault weapons continue to be legal in many states, and the fact that he had been quizzed by the FBI, and I don't think he was on a list, but those that are on a list can still buy weapons. But that man appears to have been driven by a hatred for the West. He appears to have been a radical Islamist, whatever that means. And it's undeniable, sir, that Americans are afraid. They're afraid. And one can talk about the rhetoric of Mr. Trump as it relates to those of the Muslim faith, but there's still fear. I mean, we're not far from San Bernardino, where we saw the horrors of another, that was a duo of radical Islamists.
At a certain point, we have to really avoid scapegoating an entire people because of certain radicalized people, because of certain crazy people. And it's very easy for a demagogue like Donald Trump to say, you see, I told you this was going to happen. This is even more proof of why we have to ban all the Muslims and round up the ones that are here. And even his own party mates across the country Say that's the wrong thing to say at this moment. Because what happens every time this happens is some poor Sikh guy who's running a 7-Eleven is going to get his head bashed in because somebody who's angry about what happened in Orlando thinks he's a Muslim. And Muslim people, Muslim Americans, deserve to be treated like every American. And that isn't to close your eyes to the cause of any of this, but it's to be real and to understand that because one person or 10 people or 100 people are radicalized and have this extremist view and willingness to do these crazy things, you cannot broad brush paint an entire people. And for Donald Trump, once again, he proved he does not have the temperament to be the president.
What I found particularly surprising, and apparently other Republicans did as well, is that Donald Trump seemed to suggest that the president was some type of Muslim Manchurian candidate, that his loyalty was not to America, but to Islam or radical Islam, whatever phrase you want to use. A lot of Republicans at the highest levels of government thought that was a bridge that should not have been crossed.
Here's a classic Trump technique. A guy who wears a purple tie with dots on it, you got to watch out for them because there's something wrong with them. Oh, I never said that, Brad, that there was something wrong with him. That's what Trump does. He takes a thing and he drops it out there, like he did with the president, where he said, the president won't say this and the president won't say that. Perhaps he's thinking something different. He doesn't say what the something different is, but the implication is so very clear. And look, here's the reality. Yes, there are a lot of people who are scared in America. There are a lot of people who are frustrated in America. We've talked about that throughout this entire election season. But this man is not stable enough to be the president. This man does not have the capacity to react to an event without politicizing and demagoguing it, and without using anger and hate as a fomenting and motivating tool.
Here we are in California, and life is pretty good in California. We don't have the massive loss of manufacturing jobs, and there is a lot of anger out there. And, we could argue that we're in a bubble. And so I'm just wondering, look, he clearly tapped into a segment of the population that voted in the Republican primaries. He clearly outperformed polls in the Republican primaries. Polls indicate now that he's losing to Mrs. Clinton. Are you concerned as a Democratic partisan that he may be onto something?
Look, I think that there are people who react to him and his message. I think he speaks to the anger and frustration that many in America feel. And I think that this campaign is far from won. I think it is going to take steadfast dialogue with the voters, with the people of America, laying out programs that address their greatest concerns, from income inequality to college affordability to expanding health care to stabilizing our foreign policy.
And what about terrorism? Because that is one area where, even though Mrs. Clinton seems to outpoll Mr. Trump on the question of terrorism, he does seem to lead.
There was a commercial during the 2008 campaign, and it was at 3 a.m. the phone ringing. It said, who do you want answering that phone when it rings at 3 a.m.? I'll put my trust in Hillary Rodham Clinton to be calm, to be thoughtful, to be decisive, and to make decisions that will be in the best interest of all of us.
Do you think in California, Mr. Trump, as polls suggest at this stage, is such a drag on the Republican Party that we could see a Democratic wave? And give me your fairest answer.
Being Jewish, I don't like to give myself an ayin hara, an evil eye.
Yes.
But I would say this: the perfect storm could happen for us if we play our cards right and if we do things right. There were extraordinary results in elections in those primaries.
Right.
And they bode well for Democrats.
You'll come back. He's Eric Bauman. I'm Brad Pomerance. You're watching Charter Local Edition.